teórico que es para el jueves. Hay que cambiar el vuelo para el jueves.
Claro, porque quién sabe.
Pues Jessie habló con el pabellón aquí y le dijo que el día puede terminar. Ellos ya hablaron. Así que bueno,
¿Qué es lo que no tenés?
el jueves. Ya no puede.
Nada de no tenés nada que hacer. Ah, pero no, porque vos viajas hacia el Vicente y la completa amistad. Vos tenés que completamente cancelar el viaje. Vas a pagar, te haces el proceso, te priorizas. Pero va a ser
Iba a ser un trámite y todo. Prefiero quedarme 2 días aquí y hacer esta pagada y todo. Y ahorita por eso le mandé un mensaje para decirle que ya.
dos tramos económicos que no me lo puedo cambiar el nombre, que fue hasta Fortaleza, de Fortaleza de tenía una manija que estaba como la Constantina en Mata.
Yo sé.
Ahora para la vuelta sí se recuperaron el que es directamente hasta Sao Paulo. Pero ahí lo con hotel y estamos como 15 horas, 13 horas.
Ok. Y no, yo. Si me dice que tengo el viaje el jueves, le voy a decir que no, tengo que quedarme aquí el jueves y así lo cancelo.
De 6 hasta el sábado va a ser un lío porque vas a tener que devolver 16
No, sí, sí.
y no,
Sí.
y decimos junio. Aquí está.
Pero,
Ahora sí hay que empezar a transmitir.
¿sí?
¿Cuál les doy?
¿No?
¿Cuál les doy?
Este.
Este. Ay, pero acá no puedo salir de acá, puede ser.
Hi, nice to meet you, Peter. We could go to the bathroom.
No, Laura. Detalles.
Oh, nice to meet you, Peter. Hi, nice to meet you.
You are on first. Hello, I am Laura.
I thought you, thank you for coordinating this.
No, please, sorry, she has a video, then she's which order? Intervene.
Wendy, would you would you exchange it towards like the end, maybe?
When I'm talking, can display.
Okay,
Because it's, you know, you can understand.
and yes, perfect, then when she call you to
Yeah.
speak, I will start.
Yeah, you
will
can
be
say.
without doubt. Thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Do you want to grab this seat next to Peter? Yeah.
Peter.
Yeah, awesome. Hi, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us today. So sorry for the delay in starting. I'm sure you all know the traffic issues that have been happening here in Belém. But especially so early in the morning, thank you all for making the time to be with us. I'm Sahana. I'm part of the Yale Student Environmental Coalition, and I'll be moderating today's panel on synergizing higher ed and global climate governance. We'll be discussing strategies for expanding universities' climate action, expanding ways of integrating academia into the UNFCCC, and ways of making COPs more sustainable, ethical, and so on. I'm very excited to welcome our incredibly diverse group of panelists to share insights based on their unique experiences in different parts of the higher education system. The first up next to me, we have Hin Wildman, co-founder and director of communications and development at the Yale Center for Ecosystems and Architecture. She works on LC's for joint initiatives with the UNEP and UNCCD, such as the International Drought Resilience Observatory, bringing together academic research with communities, industry, national labs, and policymakers. Hin's approach is rooted in connecting industry, academia, and the public to drive systems-level change in the built environment. Next to her, we have Cécile Saboureau, Vice President of Global Affairs at Université Côte d'Azur. Cécile has extensive experience in the nexus between higher education and international affairs, with past stints in the university's Vice Dean of Pedagogy and International Relations and as Vice Dean of the Faculty of Science in charge of International Relations. Next to her, we have Lorenzo Macove, an aerospace engineering student at Politecnico di Milano and a committed youth climate and biodiversity advocate. He has represented Italian youth at COP29, the World Food Forum, and a host of other international environmental negotiations. Next to him, we have Peter Boyd, lecturer at the Yale School of the Environment and resident fellow at the Yale Center for Business and the Environment. Outside Yale, he is founder and CEO of Time for Good, where he helps connect leaders to purpose-driven paths, and is also co-chair of the UN Race to Zero's expert peer review group. Last but certainly not least, we have Jack Markowitz, a doctoral student at Princeton School of Public and International Affairs in Science, Technology, and Environmental Policy program. Jack's previously worked on local and national environmental policy through various US department agencies. Once again, thank you all so much for being here with us today. And let's get straight into it and first discuss how higher education institutions can improve their climate change curricula and COP opportunities for students. I'm going to turn to Jack first to kick things off. What are some current shortcomings of higher education institutions in terms of climate education and COP-related programming? And where do you see the biggest opportunities for improvement?
Yeah, thank you for having me, first of all. And I guess to answer the question, I think one of the main things that I think higher education is lacking in terms of environmental and climate policy is inclusion of different voices. I've been a member of a lot of different interdisciplinary departments throughout my time as an academic. And even in all of these different spaces where we should be valuing different types of knowledge and things like that, there's a really heavy reliance on peer-reviewed science and quantitative data. And that excludes even qualitative data and humanities research that is traditionally academic, but it also excludes a lot of the traditional ecological knowledge and indigenous and local knowledge that exists and can be really beneficial for, you know, addressing the problems that we're facing as a global society today. And so the one thing that I'd like to see is a lot more focus on incorporating different types of knowledge and value systems throughout all aspects of the climate governance process, from research to implementation.
Thank you so much. That definitely resonates with my personal experience in climate education as well. I think there's a lot of room for improvement in terms of curriculum. And I think, Lorenzo, I'll ask you the same question I asked Jack. What are some current shortcomings of higher education institutions in terms of their curriculum?
I want to thank you so much for having me here as well. So Karen, like regarding the question, I do really think that environment is still seen as something niche, something like that doesn't really, like most of the people doesn't feel relating to the kind of studies that they're doing. Most people think of the environmental crisis, of the climate change related things as something like very scientific. And as well, coming from a scientific point of view and scientific world, as an aerospace engineering, I had no curricula that was environmental related, but still I think it is impelling that we need to address the thing that climate change is something that is very transversal, and it's not just a scientific problem, but it's as well a social and cultural problem that we have to address. This is the cup of the truth, and one of the thing that's gonna say at the end if it's been a success or not is definitely the discussion about adaptation. And so I would like to see higher education institutions in Italy in particular to address and to focus on environmental policing that could range in every kind of like studies, But I really think that it's not something just related to the higher education institutions, but it's something that has to start much earlier to create and to basically seed people with the sensibility that they need to grow up with regarding this problem.
Thank you so much for sharing. I totally agree. I think there's a lot of space to mainstream climate change across higher education. And I think now we'll like to see the flip side of the coin. So Cecile, I'll turn to you. What are the best ways for students to push their universities for broader climate expansion in their curriculum? And which methods are you and other university leaders most responsive to?
Thanks for the invitation. So firstly, I would like to point out that all our students, so that means we have 35,000 students, they are educated on climate change issues. So that means that we have a compulsory courses in the curriculum. And as we believe that the basic knowledge on of climate change is as essential as other basic skills and soft skills. So this is the first point. And the second one is that we encourage the students to participation and engagement through a call for contributions to a collection of advocacy pieces. And then we also foster student leadership engagement in climate action by training them in entrepreneurship and project development. And the important thing is here is to always keep in mind that the focus should remain on the best available science and not on activism.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I think it's pretty rare for a university to have compulsory climate classes, so that's a really interesting way of doing it. Peter, I'll turn to you next. With all of these comments in mind, you've spent many years lecturing on climate change and negotiations and the environment at Yale. And so I was wondering, based on your experiences, what are some strategies universities should be adopting to expand their climate and COP-related opportunities for students and for faculty?
Thanks very much, and good morning, everybody. I suppose it feels like we're in a slightly privileged bubble in the Yale School of the Environment because it's only 400 students rather than 35,000, and it's in the title. It's the Yale School of the Environment, so we talk about it all the time. I teach one on leadership, and that's a sort of grounded sort of course that threads through both systems thinking from a Western Donella Meadows type perspective, but also an indigenous ways of knowing and with different ways of looking at it. And we have guest lecturers almost like from all sides and on that. So I feel like we're privileged to attract those names, and then also the students get to see that and work with it. The one that's exciting here today, and maybe it's ideas for other universities as well, is we teach a course called International Organizations and Conferences. So we have 12 students around the COP this week, and their job is to partner with a delegation and be helpful to them. The delegation will get them a badge, and then we make sure that they get here and are supremely helpful, hopefully, over the whole of the week that they're with them. So it's a hands-on way, and I think what's interesting, maybe to the extent it's replicable, there's two things that come to mind. One is like students as observers, you learn an awful lot. Students as actors, we're recognizing what the students can contribute, both in everything from monitoring a contract clause through to taking notes to facilitating to what you're doing right now and moderating a panel in the Blue Zone. Like that idea of stepping up and leading, not just observing. I think that's a really interesting place for universities to go. And then the second sort of group of thoughts I've got is where we do recognize we're small. In Yale, for instance, the people that come through the door at 400-ish and 100 on the Masters of Environmental Management and put courses online that are then free or almost free. So Coursera is one that, for instance, I partner with and put free leadership courses there for sort of a much broader audience to get. So that's a couple of ideas to get us started.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, I agree. I think that course is a really cool way that if universities have the resources, are a really good opportunity to maybe meaningfully integrate young people into climate conferences and negotiations. I'd like to maybe dig in a little deeper into that and see how we can maybe formalize partnerships between the UNFCCC process as well as higher education institutions. And so Hind, I'll turn to you for a follow-up on that. Your current work focuses a lot on connecting different stakeholders to drive systems level change. So based on what you've seen, what types of partnerships between academia and the UNFCCC or COPs or host countries would be most effective?
Thank you so much for this question, and good morning, everyone. I'd like to start responding to your question by giving you a little bit of background on a couple of programs that we are currently working on. The Ecological Living Network program. It is a program that we have with with UNEP. And basically what it is we develop housing model that generate their own clean energy, water, food and air quality using plant as well as bio-based material. We have developed, I think there's something in the background in here, you can see some visual. We have developed the first one called ELM New York City, ELM New York in New York, and we've developed a second one in Nairobi. And now we are currently developing a third one, ELM Brazil, which will be installed at the Museum of the Future in June 2026. We have actually announced this installation last week with the president of the museum and some other partners. And then we have this second program called IDRO, International Drought Resilience Observatory. IDRO, it's a program that we have developed with UNCCD. So that's another UN organization. And basically, IDRO, it's a global platform that really help countries and stakeholders to strengthen and track their drought resilience through data analytics, AI, and case studies that we have developed with local government. So for this, as an example project, we are working with very large partners. We have actually the WMO that's part of this program. We have we're working with NASA, the EU, and local government, which is for us an amazing experience. We worked with Senegal, KSA, and so on. So both of these projects, I will say, can move forward only because we have so many different actors that are bringing like different expertise into this project. So we are working with research scientists, academia, we have architects, engineers, UN organizations, industry, and also we are also working with the local community. So this is the background, and to answer your question, I will say that the most effective partnership really are the ones that are integrated. The one when research, funding, as well as public engagement come together. Okay, so as an example, for us, research collaboration, what we mean is it brings science, prototype, as well as testing together. In regards to funding, it make it possible to further develop and build and scale projects such as the ELM. And this is something that we will be doing with ELM Brazil. And I will say the third one is the public outreach. It's actually ensure that a COP installation become something that's more lasting, right? It's not just here for the 2 weeks exhibit, it will last further. So when those three pieces line up, things really move well and fast. And because we're not just delivering a structure or report, we are actually building capacity, ownership, as well as long-term momentum inside of the host country.
Thank you so much for sharing. I think a lot of like best practices over there for future collaborations between different stakeholders. So thank you. Jack, I'm going to turn to you next. So for some background, all of the students on this panel put together as part of a coalition of students from more than 50 universities, a COP30 manifesto with recommendations to improve COPs in terms of their engagement with higher education, accessibility in general, governance, and so on. And so Jack, you're part of that coalition. And so I was wondering, what are one or two recommendations that you think are particularly crucial at this moment in time with regards to the COP process?
Yes, thank you for that question. There's a lot in the manifesto that I think is really, really special and important. Just two things that really come to mind. The first one relating to higher education is the call for higher education institutions to make their research and knowledge more publicly available. And that includes, not only distribution of that information, but also making sure that that information is intelligible to a wider audience. I think in the academy, a lot of the times we kind of start talking to ourselves and spiral into all of this jargon and language that doesn't really make sense to someone who's not living in that world 24/7. And so I think that is one of the most important aspects of the manifesto. And secondly, I think the call for COPs to be more sustainable is also really important. I think we all like to think that we're here and we're doing more good for the climate than our carbon footprint of getting here on a plane and staying in a hotel and all the food we're eating. But I think it's really important for us here and for the COP presidencies and the COP as an organization, the UNFCCC, to really walk the walk and really live up to the message that we're preaching. Who knows how much electricity we're using to power this building into the late night negotiations, and all the air conditioning and the water we're using, not just for drinking, but for the bathrooms and everything like that. And so I think really having transparency about what the sustainability protocols for COPs are, and then also ensuring that COPs themselves are sustainable.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. I think it's really important that we walk the talk. And I also think that it's important for higher education universities to make climate science research more accessible. And that includes communicating it without unnecessary jargon to the public. And I think, Lorenzo, I'll turn to you next for the same question. What are your favorite recommendations?
So I would say I tried to lower to two, but I couldn't. So I got three that I feel they are extremely important. The first one is the introduction of the LDC states rotation every 5 years at that host country. I feel that it's extremely important for the least and most affected countries on climate change and the least represented over COPs, and the one they're facing the most and problems related to climate change have a voice and have a mean to be representative. We know that the presidency has a lot of power in discussing and deciding the agenda. So deciding how the work is going to lead and what things are going to be discussed or not. So I feel that it's extremely impelling and something that it should be improved. And as well, I feel that it's extremely important as we are at COP30, and out of nowhere, I would have never expected, we were talking about that after Baku, there could be at COP that would raise the number of fossil fuels lobbyists over here. But here we are with 1,602 lobbyists. That is the second largest delegation after Brazil. And I feel it's extremely important to reduce and make a maximum number of lobbyists, of fossil fuel lobbyists that could enter and get into the venue. And we're entering the second week. So they're going to be extremely working out to go against what's going to be like the most progressive things that we could see out of this COP. So it's extremely important. And at the same time, something related to education. I feel that the embed of climate change education across the disciplines is extremely important, and that the UNFCCC and the COP presidency should work toward that. There should be like some sort of work that could include students and could include and basically share climate and COP knowledge abroad in the higher education systems and general education system. Thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing. I agree. I think it's pretty jarring that there is such a huge presence of fossil fuel lobbyists, especially when there isn't very little transparency about their activities. So thank you for sharing. Cecile, I'll turn to you next to dig in further on the partnerships bit. So your role involves a lot of building collaborations between academia and international organizations and processes. So what are some strategies that you think other senior leaders at universities should adopt to continue bringing academia and climate governance together?
Thank you for the question. So firstly, I would like to say that for the past 5 years, Université Côte d'Azur has chosen to be present and above all active in the climate COPs to counter the presence of lobbyists and bring scientific voices to the debates. So we quickly realized that in order to be heard, we needed to partner with major UN organizations Hence our collaboration with IPCC and WMO on these pavilions through the invaluable support of Philanthropy Cortes Solari and MERI Foundation. And then we need to participate in international organization also. So that means that we have researchers that bring their expertise to, for example, IPCC, FAO, WHO, and to also to encourage our researcher to hold UNESCO chairs. And for example, we have one chair on peace and development through law. And then to further stimulate participation, we have also created a MOOC dedicated to science diplomacy to train students and staff. And I should say that in a few months, we have thousands of students, particularly PhD students from all disciplines that have taken these courses, demonstrating that the interest of the entire academic community in climate engagement.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. I think there's a lot of programs there that I would love for my university to implement too. So that's really good to know. Peter, I'm going to turn to you next. I'd love to dig in more into how we can improve COP processes, especially based on the recommendations that Lorenzo and Jack shared. So you've attended many COPs and have studied the process extensively. And so in your opinion, where are the biggest opportunities for improvement in terms of either making COPs more accessible to academia and the general public, and also making them more sustainable?
Wow, huge question. And I think it's one that I think we as a world wrestle with everywhere, like within the blue zone of the negotiation itself, the commentariat that sort of writes about it from afar. But so quick thoughts. I mean, one is, let's go back to almost like 1992 in Rio Convention, where we as humans separated for processes that were really part of the same system. And so that's one of the fundamental pieces that is hard. That, you know, the fact that the UN conventions are separate. They're coming together, they're recognizing each other, they're cross-referencing each other, but I think there's something in that. I mean, if you were to start again and you had a stable governance geopolitically, that might be where you might go. I think the other piece in terms of representation is really interesting, building from the bottom up, the inclusion of the audiences that have already been mentioned, whether it's students, research, indigenous peoples, that sort of threaded in as true involvement rather than the sort of the observer negotiator status. And then I really like the idea of the funding, the transparency of funding for access, as in, if you were paid to get here, disclose how you were paid. And then flip that round and sort of boost it a little bit, and then have funding available for, say, students to observe and lift up other delegations. We're lucky enough at Yale to have a small fund, so that's why our 12 students are there. They're paid so that the small delegations find them as a pure help. They're not a financial burden. But what if there was a relatively modest fund globally that meant that students and indigenous people are basically planted and funded into lots of the parties? That would be an incredible, relatively low lift, high ROI way of improving the access. And then I think that the piece on the sustainability, and let's put sustainability in with logistics, because there's a lot of fairness and unfairness that can be embedded in the system by the logistics of a COP. And think about that. I am actually one of those that like the idea of Katowice, Belém, like problem areas. You know, Belém is wrestling with being unsustainable city in a sustainable part of the world. You can see it with the sewage system and how to get around. And Katowice was a town built around a coal mine. So Baku has this monumental buildings shaped in the oil flames because that is where their wealth came from. Like, that is a really interesting place to hold a COP. And I think I think we should keep that if it's in a country that safeguards the safety of all the representation we need, so that they safeguard voices, they safeguard protests, labor rights. I think you've got a great thing in your manifesto about like how they run the conference with ILO, etc. And then is it in a city that is used to absorbing 50 to 100,000 people? and not just for a COP. They do it regularly so that they can absorb it in terms of hotel rooms and public transport systems and access. And if you do that, you're already way more sustainable. Sort of, and then on top of that, I think this idea of like no new buildings, you like either use ones you've got, say like a London XL or something, like something like that there, or the Bonn area that hosted Fiji. That was a really good idea. So the idea of like either there's no new buildings, or I love what Hind is doing with the ELM. What about an ELM for COP buildings? And it's a national competition for like the most sustainable way of building an exhibition center. So there's lots of different ways I think we could be creative on the sustainable building side as well. The one big red herring, and you didn't quite mention it, but we all should be constant. The airfares, the air pollution to get here is a tricky one, and so more integrated meetings on Zooms, which we did in COVID, and maybe potentially less people here. But you can't get rid of the magic of gathering, so that we have to wrestle with that. Some thoughts to get us started.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I think many thoughts that I picked up on there. I think two that really stood out to me is first, meaningful engagement over here. I think funding can be such a huge issue for students and Indigenous people to participate, and a fund would be a pretty incredible way of mainstreaming our participation here. Especially in this COP, we've seen the lack of effective engagement of Indigenous people and young people. So definitely picked up on that. And the other is very much in terms of the sustainability of COPs and then of themselves. So Hind, I actually had a question for you on that. All of this work that you've been doing with the Yale Center for Environment, for Ecosystems and Architecture, are there any best practices or learnings for projects that you are currently working on or have worked on in the past that you think COPs could implement to make them more sustainable building-wise?
Yes, certainly. Thank you for mentioning the ELM. I think it's definitely one example of principle that the COP could adapt. So as an example, the prototype that we are building, the ecological living module, are designed for low carbon, designed for rapidly assemble and disassemble, as well as made out of locally, naturally bio-based materials. So they balance energy, water, and thermal comfort, as well as materials. So I'm not saying that COP should build an ELM, but they should certainly, or they could certainly adapt some of those principles around modularity, circularity, and climate responsive design. And I think the other key element that I'd like to add is our research around materials and circularity relating to using local materials and designing a low waste system. So COP host could actually use that approach to rethink pavilion design and cut the footprint of the whole event.
Thank you so much for sharing. I think there's a lot of really interesting pieces of that. I think we see a lot of individual pavilions maybe implementing sustainable building practices, but not necessarily on a COP-wide basis. So I think that's a really interesting way of looking at it. I want to deepen maybe a little bit more into the sort of ways in which we participate at COP. So I'd like to turn to our student representatives first. I'll turn to Lorenzo and then Jack. What does effective student engagement look like at COP? Because I think that was a really big part of the manifesto and a really big piece of what we've been discussing today.
Thank you so much for the question. Actually, would like to reconnect to what Mr. Boyd said at the beginning and the way that actually you're addressing your students here at COP. I feel that's a very interesting way. For what I've heard, for what I've seen here, I never came as a student. I always came as a part of NGOs and representative of youth ideas in like in civil society contest. But the students that I met here, most of them are like clueless how a COP works. They're like just pumped here, brought inside the COP, and they don't know how to navigate it. And it's extremely difficult. For me, I just got yesterday. It's my third COP in overall, and still it's like a little bit difficult to adapt to a new environment, to adapt to a new kind of presidency, a new kind of managing the things. So one of the things that it will be very important is like getting a process, like getting them prepared enough to come here with the knowledge, with how a COP works, what is the UNFCCC, what is the negotiations, how you can contribute that. And definitely like try to get them not just as an observer, like passive observer of the work that could be, yes, interesting and educational somehow, but at the same time, doesn't really get you to understand and to be part of the change, but try to get them some tools, some opportunity to make their voice heard. It's something that we struggle as youth. It's something that we've always been struggling. I feel sometimes that if you try to approach a delegation, if you try to approach people and you present yourself as a youth, sometimes they do underestimate you. They do like, oh yeah, well, maybe later. If you approach them in other ways, like more like, I would say, like lecture way, they're like more propense to like listen to you and to help you somehow. And definitely getting them a way to be part of the delegation would be amazing. I feel that like Yale definitely has like a privilege on that, like from a financial point of view, from a connection point of view. So there, I feel like, and I think of other university, maybe in like developing countries, in the LDCs, seeds countries, that would be extremely important for them to be represented here and to grab the students here. Maybe that's something that could be structuralized on the UNFCCC and COP presidencies, like creating a fund, creating a um, um, like doesn't come to word to my mind. An office that can talk and that can create this kind of environment, facilitate the connection between the universities and the different parties. There's like a bunch of like countries. I recall Cali last year where we got a deadlock because we've been there until 9 a.m. and then Susanna has to, well, I'm sorry, but it's 9 a.m. We have to point like to put it at a hand, and then at 5 p.m. they resumed it, but it was not a quorum. There was not enough people because LDCs, CIS countries could not afford to change the flight, basically. So like, and as well, what I see in the negotiations from like a Western point of view, that's something I hate, that sometimes we try to tend on the last day, on the last days, to stretch the negotiations until late night, because you know that like there's delegations that are like 1 or 2 people, and then they're going to be exhausted and they're going to be willing to compromise more likely on toward your way. So like give them the opportunity to be, you know, like to have more people. I don't know if you know, there is an association that is like, if I remember well, the Youth Negotiator Academy. It's like they're trying to connect countries that they don't have huge delegations, and they say, okay, if you give me some passes, some badge, I will train people during a year, and then I will make them ready to be a negotiator for your country. So something like that, it could be interesting. I'm sorry if I've been speaking out.
No, I think a lot of really important points in there, especially in terms of meaningful engagement and the fact that representation here at COP can often be very inequitable. You have some delegations that are incredibly large disproportionately, and that gives them a huge advantage. And also considering the carbon footprint of having such supersized delegations and what is worth it, what is versus what is not. I think maybe before I turn to Jack to answer that question, I might actually flip it back to Peter. I think a lot of your class is definitely a really good example on how you can meaningfully integrate students into delegations and participation with funding. And obviously Yale has a big advantage in terms of its reputation and connections, as Lorenzo mentioned. But I was wondering if you have if you'd be able to share more about how you structured the class to maybe give some ideas to our audience here who would be interested in implementing a similar program at their own universities.
Yeah, as you say, there's some things that we're just lucky, sort of fortunate to inherit, with both the brand and just how long it's been there, and then some people that have been there a very long time ago that then leave money for the next generation. So there is a positive legacy there, to the extent it's the way it's structured is we teach a little bit like what you were suggesting, a miniature, like this is how to UNFCCC, this is how to UNCCD, and do it across international organizations and conferences. We do try and encourage people to look at it with a system lens. So what does it look like as a system? Is it broken? Is it fit for purpose? If it isn't, which it normally isn't, because it certainly isn't moving fast enough, whichever conference you pick, you know, like where is that breaking down? And it's almost like get people to think about it before they go. One of my big assignments is a work plan, which is like, this is what you think you're going to do. And this is what you think the system looks like. And then they come back and they go, this is what I actually did. And this is what I actually now think the system is. And to put yourself on a spectrum of almost like systems thinking from what I call extinction rebellion, like tear the whole thing up and start again, through to tweaks, very small tweaks. And I really want to be part of a delegation. And they put themselves on that spectrum at the start, and then they put themselves on that in the end. And it's just that idea of like, this is complex, and it's incredibly complex system to change, and to be appreciating of that. Just again, the way that then we work is we are lucky enough to, we have a small class, so we can't fund very many, but then we fund the air travel and the accommodation of the student if they find a partner. And then the partner then gets effectively free help for the badge access. But we do encourage them to go to conferences that don't necessarily need a partner. And we do, because it's the smaller conferences, you sometimes get more insight into how the international negotiations are going. So I think quite a lot from a student perspective, we kind of potentially fixate on the COP, the UNFCCC COP, that is, when in fact the other conventions and the other smaller conferences, you get to see how these things are really negotiated.
Thank you for sharing. The class is obviously super interesting. And I think on that last bit, I think often people forget that the intersessionals and Bonn have a lot more technical discussions than COP sometimes. And so that's actually a really good opportunity to engage too. And it's a lot, perhaps a lot simpler to find accommodation in other instances there since it's a fixed venue. But now I'll hand it back to Jack. What are effective ways of, or what would effective student engagement look like to you at COPs?
Yeah, so this is my first COP, and so I'm not sure how much I can really answer this very well. But I will say that some things coming into the COP that I think were, I don't want to say hindered, but in some ways hindered my engagement or meaningful engagement, is just a confidence and awareness issue. I'm here on an observer badge from a university, and so I'm wondering, does this give me the right to walk up to a party member and start a conversation with them? And who can I talk to? Who am I not supposed to talk to? What are the boundaries? And so I think really classes like Peter's and other classes, not even necessarily that send students to COP or that have them partner with a delegation to have a different badge type, but just really instill within them the confidence to know what they're walking into, what they're going to do, what's the kind of mode of operation, and a lot of the kind of factors about what you can't do, what you should do, what's acceptable and what's not. I think that would be a really beneficial way for a lot of students to further engage in COP and engage more deeply, rather than a lot of the confusion, even though some of that is going to occur inherently because they're different every year.
Yeah, definitely. I think that capacity building is a really big part of ensuring that when young people and students are here, they're able to actively and meaningfully engage instead of just observing, which is also important, but it would be much better, I think, to meaningfully participate in the process. And so I think, Cecile, I'll turn to you on that. You mentioned that students at University Côte d'Azur all are mandated to take climate change classes. And so I was wondering what that looks like in practice. So I think that could be a really unique way of perhaps preparing students to participate in conferences like this.
Yeah, I would like to stress that our responsibility as university is also to help other higher education institutions to get accredited and to be part of the COP. And then we also help to organize and secure very high level events, so UNFCCC side events, where we gather all universities as university networks. So we represent hundreds of universities and students and staff, of course. And then we can also engage our community through what we call a COP mirror. And then we are organizing in this a lot of different events. So it's an annual event starting in October and until December, where we have a lot of events. So, for example, conferences, hackathons, and film debates, and also performance to encourage the students and staff, but also the citizen and decision makers to meet and to discuss about the subject of COPs. And one of the prizes to recognize the engagement of students is to support them to go to Bonn, for example, and to assist to be part of the debates and to see how is these decisions organized, and to see how the parties are debating, what subject they are dealing with, and so on. So it's very important for us to help the students to be engaged and to train them as future leaders also.
Yeah, thank you very much for highlighting the fact that, sometimes it's not just partnerships between the UNFCCC and higher education institutions. Sometimes it's within academia themselves and building off of our own networks. And so, Hin, I'm going to turn to you on that. You do a lot of work on institutional partnerships within and between different types of stakeholders. So I was wondering, what are some principles that you think people should keep in mind? Because I'm sure there are a lot of points of contention when you have such different institutions working together. So what are some principles to keep in mind when establishing partnerships between academic institutions and international organizations and so on?
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question. So in our case, we're working with so many different groups, from academia to government to UN institutions. And sometimes we may have some sort of tension, but it's totally normal. And in my experience, I think that successful partnership really comes down to 3 principles. I would say number one, it's around the co-design from day one. Okay, it's not about consulting approach, it's about co-designing together. Projects work well really like when we stakeholders share the same vision, or where we come to the same vision together. And then there is also the clarity aspect. Each institution or organization will have their own priority or timelines. And so you need to really clarify roles and expectation from the start. And most conflict really happens because I will say someone assume that something the other party didn't know. And then the third principle for me is the shared ownership of outcomes. It is essential and important that projects doesn't belong to one actor, but really belongs to the group, because otherwise the project won't last. But when everyone feel responsible of the outcome, like as an example, we can see with our program, the ELN and the HYDRO, the work become durable and scalable beyond the COP. So for me, it really comes down to the 3 principles: co-design, clarity, and shared ownership.
Yeah, thank you very much for sharing. I totally agree. I think that's sort of like holding each other accountable in like a broader way when you have so many different stakeholders working together is a really critical part of it. So thank you for highlighting that. And so now to sort of wrap things up, I think we've done a lot of best practices sharing, et cetera. I think it'd be really good to envision what a potential collaboration could look like. So I'll turn it perhaps to our students first. So perhaps Lorenzo, in an ideal world, sort of what would the nexus, or what would the sort of overlap between higher education and climate governance look like to you? Like, what would that relationship look like?
I have actually to think about that. But first thing first, that would start from like a financial quantum point of view. I come from a country that lately in the 25 past years has been always lowering the percentage of GDP that has been spending on education. I come from a country where basically education is not valued, where lecturer, professor, and teachers, and all the stuff that contribute to the education basically world, they are like undermined, they are underpaid, they're not valorized. And so I would definitely like to see some kind of like valorization of the education, valorization both from like the working part of like of the working like the people of the working environment of the people that work there. I've been myself like a teacher for Model United Nations, so I've been working with high school students, and I know how important imperative is the contribution and to be able to keep up with your ambitions, with be satisfied with your work and with yourself to make and to be able to inspire students. And on the other side, I would like to see like an environment, a political environment that is caring about my future, is caring to give me the knowledge, the tools to be productive, to be like to understand and to judge the environment, to understand and judge the historical background and what's going to be the history that we're going to study on the books nowadays and not like tomorrow. So yeah, that would be my point of view.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. And I'll turn to you, Hin, now, just for, I think your center at Yale focuses on engaging in COPs more in a pavilion-based way, for example, and engaging not necessarily in the negotiations, but definitely like sharing best practices and knowledge with your projects with different UN partners. So I was wondering how that looks like on the ground, like what sort of work that involves a COP, and like how other universities could maybe like implement that.
So I will say that we are very lucky because we are working with UN organizations, UNEP and UNCCD that are allowing us to bring a project to life. So we are super lucky for that instance. The ELM actually started from, I think it was during the Climate Week back in 2018. So I think for me personally and for our research center to work with those type of organizations that are opening door to us to showcase what we are doing in the lab, as well as opening doors for us to work with cities. We've seen with our project, the Hydro, this is allowing us to work with the local governments from various countries around the world, as well as fantastic organizations such as NASA and WMO. So it's really like collaborative, and we are super lucky to be associated with the UN for those specific projects, which are also projects that are long-term projects. They're not just one project. As I said, the ELM we started in 2018, and the Hydro project has been already 2 years, and we've developed like a park, and we will be presenting at the COP17. That's the UNCCD COP in Mongolia in August 2027. August 2026.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing. I think that's a really different approach to like the nexus between higher ed and climate governance. So thank you for sharing. And now I'll hand it for our last questions to Peter and Jack. Both of y'all, same question. What does, in your ideal world, no political considerations, no budget hindrances or anything like that, what does the nexus between climate governance and higher education look like to you for both Peter and Jack?
We'll keep the spirit of student first. So, Jack.
All right. So I think in general, the climate governance and higher education, and maybe this is coming from my personal experience, which has been privileged, but tends to work pretty well together. But I think that also means that it suffers from that the combination suffers from what ails both aspects of this kind of duology of climate governance and higher education. And so I think one thing that's really important is taking the time to really engage with communities. This goes to Hin's point earlier about co-designing. And I think just taking the time to really engage with communities, hear what they want, and be able to advocate that both in the policy space and in the research space is going to be really important moving forward. It's one thing that I think we hear in both policy rooms and in the academy is there's no time, there's no money. And I think we really need to rethink that ideology and really focus on what we do have and make sure that the foundations that we're building are really solid, because it's even more of a waste of time, and there's going to be even less time in the future if we don't build from a solid foundation that is really inclusive and includes the ideas of everyone and respect for everyone.
Same question. It's been an inspiring panel. So I was just sort of both listening and sort of having a few ideas as we were talking. The first thing, if we're in this dream scenario, that a group goes away and reinvents the whole thing. So, you know, join the conventions back together, but preserve the pieces that are not broken. Like the Paris Agreement would not be agreed again under this current geopolitical environment. So keep the things that aren't broken, but then reinvent the system. So that's one dream scenario where there's no budget. I think the next piece is on the host city and all the access pieces we talked about. And then I inspired by what Hein was saying, that like almost like either there is a better than zero building that is created with a proven legacy for afterwards, like they do for the Olympics. They have to say, this is what's going to happen afterwards for these things we're building for the Olympics. Same thing for the COP, or it's pre-existing. So, and then all that stuff about public transport, etc. The third one on this idea of access, I would just like light bulb, you know, those shoes or socks where you buy one and somebody in the developing world gets one, you know, those sort of, so they're slightly more expensive. So what about the fossil fuel lobbyists? They have to fund a student or an indigenous person if they are coming under their own dime. So it could be a self-funding piece there. You obviously still have to cap them at some point, but then that would ensure that they're at least outnumbered. So that idea of funding access. And then the last piece on this sort of transparency piece is like, it exists in other sectors. This way, like, private sector conferences have excellent ways for online people to contribute and be on the debate and see everything, and every debating hall has a camera. So that idea of really improving the online access of what goes on in the halls. And then with the academics in mind, there's things like Undermined and other packages where you can Google, you know, you can search for the topic and the relevant papers get pulled in the margin. What about that as a service to the negotiators? So the negotiators are negotiating a clause, and here's all the relevant scientific papers, academic papers that you can draw in according to it. And then vice versa, the academics can then draw in the process of the negotiations in real time. So this kind of dual piece of sort of online access to papers going both ways, I got quite excited about, such that with the online access improved here, there's a phrase from the mayor of Bogota that said, like, development for me is not when my poor people can afford cars, but when my rich people choose public transport. And I think of that in the COP as like, wouldn't it be great? Is this like what developments when most people choose to be online, because it's a better way of doing COP. And then a few people have to be in the room, the flag carriers, and a few others that really want to meet in person. But actually the best experience is online.
Thank you so much. I think a lot of really interesting ideas there, especially in terms of the mutual relationship between academia and higher ed. And if only a lot of them would be pragmatic, but I think that's all really good to know. Now we'd like to turn it over to the audience. If anybody has any questions they'd like to ask our panelists, now's the time.
Thank you. Very useful. I appreciate all your remarks. Professor Bozzi, Coordinator International University Network on Biodiversity and Cultural Diversity, established an agreement with the United Nations, the Secretary of the CBD. Linking educational science policy and society communities. This one is our interface, and we are sad because it's not a project, public good, volunteering, involvement, engagement. It's a cultural movement, think tank. And so we are sad. We are the only academic network, the only NGO at the global level that works on this interface. And this one is not the elephant. These are 1 million of elephants in these rooms. We are a club. I am very critical. We are a club. Is it clear? 264 millions of higher education students all over the world, UNESCO statistics. Roughly 50,000 universities. This one is the problem, not participation in the COP or not. I love what your university is doing, and we will discuss more because we check constantly, and we hope that some universities are developing some science policy society, not solely science policy programs, courses, engagements. What is the role of university? How to change our mindset, opening the gates of universities. When I am in a school of agriculture, after 30 minutes, I joke with my colleagues, sorry, I don't see farmers around. I would be happy to see farmers and not security at the gate of universities. Ivory towers doesn't work. We love the mission of universities, but we have to adapt, upscale, innovate. So in very, very few words, of course, this one is a comment, is not a question, and I would love to interact with each of you because this one is a think tank program. We don't have spaces, and we don't have courses. We don't have the capacity. We participate in the negotiations, and we wrote the text on education that after 3 years of our advocacy with all the governments was approved as international law in the global biodiversity framework. It was not a government, it was an international network. But I don't want to emphasize, because this one is public good, the students, grassroots level movement. I would love to see others. Universities are not here. There is no mandate. The university with the mandates of the university here are no more than 3, 4. All colleagues, students are here at individual level. That's all. This one is 1 million of elephants in the room. Not what we do in our university, but what we don't do in our university, what we don't do in the system. In the global academic system we love. We don't have to change. Thank you so much.
Cecile, maybe I'll pass that to you, or Peter, whoever is interested.
What did they say? A question is sometimes a short sentence with a question mark on the end, but you have so much in there. I heard, well, no, I got it. But I took a question because there was a question in there that I wanted to answer because I think it was embedded in the middle, which is how do we open the gates? How do we have not security guards and sort of teachers at the door, but farmers at the door? That's where I took as a question that I'd love to answer, because I think almost by necessity, you have these places. Yale, there's a kind of joke that sort of it's a series of medieval villages and no map. So it's hard to get to, but when you get there, they're very welcoming. And they go, oh, how did you find us? And then that's actually within Yale too. You go from the different schools to each other and they don't really talk to each other that much. We haven't met yet. And we're at Yale. That's a classic example where we go all the way to COP in order to go, oh, there's somebody here that's doing interesting things. So how to open the gates is a question I do want to answer, because us and a few other universities, sort of we put as many, well, quite a few of our courses online on Coursera. And I think if Coursera was perfect, as in it was truly free, then that would be a place where anyone could go for any of our courses. It sharpens the tool. It made me a better teacher, I think, in real life by writing a script and getting it into video that are short and then getting online almost for free. It's like $40 rather than $0. But if somebody could fund Coursera and make Coursera truly free for everybody, and then I think you're getting the open the gates, that anyone with an internet connection and a cell phone can access, sort of the universities in the world and the lecturers that want to put courses online. So I think that there is something in that, is like how do we open the gates?
Can I add something? That is interesting, but like coming from an engineering point of view, I feel many times, and I would like to recall to From, he's a psychologist, like Freudian psychologist that I really actually appreciate. And when I was reading one of his books, like something really stunned me, it's basically say, with the beginning of the new century, I was hoping that things could change because with the raising of the scientific world, with the raising of the exponential development of the scientific world, I was feeling that the humanity could actually really progress, not just from a scientific point of view, but from a cultural and sensible point of view. But then he said, but rather than like creating like scientists, we've been creating technicians. And I do feel that in my university. I do see people that are like very smart. They could actually change the world, but they're lacking the sensibility to actually change it. They're lacking the sensibility to actually understand the world as it is. And then rather than the technicians, I will actually add autocratic technicians, where like they're just focusing on themselves. So like I would actually like, yes, people could actually like open the gates through like online courses, but on my personal regard and the people that I've been sharing the course with, that I met during my studies, none of them would actually willing to access those courses because they don't have the sensibility to understand the impelling and the needs to access those courses, the impelling and the need to fight for climate, for it's not just from like a scientific point of view, but from a social and cultural point of view.
Yeah, I would like to add something that, so it's not a matter of courses and training, it's a matter of action. And at Université Côte d'Azur, we have farmers and we also have fishermen and fisherwomen around the table. And we encourage scientists and researchers to build projects with the whole society. So that means that we encourage the co-creation project with, of course, scientists, but also so the academia, but also it's a matter of multi-sectoral project. So we have companies, we have farmers and fishermen, as I said, and we also have private and philanthropic foundations for funding, and we have the 4 pillars of the magic square is the decision makers and also the civil society. So that means that we have together all these 4 pillars to be able to co-create projects that will be very valuable for the society. And for example, one project, we are involved in the creation of a new marine protected area in the Bay of Nice. So Nice is the 5th city of France, so big city. And well, we are discussing that project since 5 years now, and will be created hopefully in December. And we have around the table, we have scientists, of course, but we also have the citizen, and we have the fishermen, we fisherwomen, we have the city, so the decision makers, and the funders also. And then we are discussing how we can, for example, improve the fishing practices to help the fishermen to have more sustainable fishing practices, and how we can gather all the people to be able to create these new marine protected areas that would be valuable for everybody.
So since you were here maybe from the beginning, I'd like to touch on the 2 of our projects, like to start with IDRO, International Drought Resilience Observatory, a project we have with UNCCD. So that specific global platform that we are developing include also farmers, okay? Because the platform that we are developing is not just for the decision makers or the experts or the government, it goes all the way down to farmers, and we are working with the farmers. And touching on our project, the ELM that we are bringing at the Museum of the Future in Rio de Janeiro, for us, we are bringing this project as well to the general public. We are so lucky that this project will be at the Museum of the Future. So it's going to be open to the general public, not just, again, once more to the experts or policy makers. And we have been asked if this project can stay there for 1 year, because they don't want just to keep it there. They want to bring it as well to potentially like favelas. So as an example, something I didn't mention earlier when I was talking about our project is we are a research center. We are developing this type of housing living, but we are also collecting data. So as part of our process, we have sensors that are integrated as part of the module that we are building. And it's a way for us to actually improve, but we are also, talking to the local communities to integrate their feedback into our design process.
Well, amazing. Thank you so much for that. That's all that engagement. We've got 2 more questions. I'll pass it to you first.
Thank you so much for all of your insightful answers. So I'm doing a PhD in chemical engineering, and I'm very interested in the interface between science and policy, and that's where I would like to take my career. So amongst my peers, most people either go directly into industry, or if they want to stay in scientific research, they go do postdoctoral studies somewhere, and they go ahead and they do some other kind of like lab position. You mentioned that you do science diplomacy training at your university, and I hadn't heard of like that specifically being like a program at a university. So I was wondering if you or at Yale or anywhere that you're aware of like some kind of like postdoctoral program regarding science policy or science diplomacy that someone with like my type of background, for example, could have access to later on.
So regarding the MOOC on science diplomacy, unfortunately for now it's only in French, but it's completely free. So that means it's an online MOOC and completely free. So it's not embedded in a curriculum. So all students that can take this course, this MOOC, and then they get a badge to recognize their investment and their training. And then we have, of course, we have some postdoc position on science policy, but it's not a regular training, you mean? And we involve students also, and so there are no more students, of course, at postdoc position. For example, we have volunteers. It's a French, very French position for international volunteers, and they are involved in science diplomacy. We have 1 people in Brussels, for example, to help the university and university partners to do science diplomacy, but also to create some European projects or other projects to involve other universities, but also partners. So that means decision makers and citizens.
Where are you studying? Where?
Northwestern University.
Right. Okay. So there's one sort of idea that I think is duplicable or copyable, which is just launched in Yale, the Yale Planetary Solutions, which is a website in its own right that might be useful and interesting. They have a doctoral fellowship program, which intentionally gathered 20 PhDs from around the university and I help sort of coach and teach some of them. It's an incredible group, from physics to chemistry to environment to puppetry to the div school, the divinity school. There's just like an incredible array of PhD programs, and it's intentionally done that way so that those 20 people gather and talk about their careers postdoc. And typically they're not ones that want to dive into academia forever, where the career plan is obvious and they don't need help. It's the sort of, I need help, I want to chat, I want to take my PhD somewhere. So that doesn't need too much money, just you and 20 other people in your university. They go, we're very different, but we wanted to go somewhere different together. So that might be a good one to copy. And then the other one specifically, YSELP, is the Yale Center for Environmental Law and Policy. And I think they have a load of resources and could potentially pull in your degree. You could be on their mailing list and get lots of resources there.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm Akibori Nelson. I come from Togo. I would like to congratulate you for your presentation, your clear presentation. Thank you very much around that topic. If you want to combat really climate change, I think we are start for education. And what we are discuss, education, the high education. I have here one of our University of the Togo represented, Mr. Professor Bawa. So my question or my intervention, I have three. The first one, the comet. Comet, on my opinion, I think that in university, that we use the common program for all departments or different program, level by level. I think it's important because of in my country, I tell you we are just start with new topic, climate governance, and with the higher education. So it is important, too important. We start by program we develop or dress for students. So my second question, I think how we can evaluate the synergy higher education and climate governance. How? If your experience, do you want to show or present your experience about evaluation, maybe after 2 or 5 years, implement that topic? We need necessarily evaluate about the topic. And the last, my last preoccupation about early warming for all. They're right. Look at behind of you. Yeah. So about climate governance, how can we integrate it, that process, early warming for all? In Togo, I think we are just start that process. Thank you very much. Excuse me, my English is so poor. Thank you very much.
He wants to go first. But okay, I'll start with some. I can't answer them all. But the idea of like it starts with education. I would love to chat afterwards. So in terms of, I think this idea of collaboration of universities across the world on a common goal. What's so magic about meeting in the blue zone is we've almost by definition got a common goal. That's how we got here. Sort of, there's an element of passion and drive to get everyone here. So we'd love to continue that. Back on the online piece, I think there is hopefully a real hope in something like a kind of our Coursera platform that automatically translates the creator's language into at least 20 plus languages. And then the other clever bit, and I think it's getting better over time as well, the moment that you create an assignment as a participant and it gets swapped with somebody else in the world that's just done it and translated. So if you did it in Brazil and it's in Portuguese, it goes over to you sort of Armenia and translate it, and vice versa. It goes back to Brazil. So I think there's ways that online and artificial intelligence can actually help us in this educational piece for all. Albeit there's a trust issue. So sometimes I think those courses have to come from trusted messengers. It's not just a brand on a webpage, but it's like local people that have done it that pass on, this is a good idea, and go to local people. So potentially local university partnerships are what are ways to do that. I think that's probably what, but I love your second charge, which is like, if this does all work and all the things we talked about in the panel, how do we measure it works? I think that's a really quite an interesting one. And maybe there's fairness in the outcomes. if there's like funded students and Indigenous people in delegations and defunded, or at least they've helped subsidize, sort of more representation from the fossil fuels, that might feed through into the negotiations over the long run.
Yeah, so regarding the first question about education, so as mentioned, we have courses, basic courses on climate change issues for all students. So that means that the bases are for the same for everyone. But then when the students are going up in their education programs, they have more specialized courses on that, depending on their specialty. So, for example, for chemistry, of the people of so it depends of their curriculum. And the second question, how we measure the impact of what we are doing, for example, at Université Côte d'Azur, because we are involved in that process since 5 years now, we see more and more students engaged in projects related to climate change issues. In entrepreneurship also, because we are also training all students for entrepreneurships, and we see how the students, they engaged in entrepreneurship programs and projects about climate change issues. And then for the third one, we also are very concerned about early warning systems. And for example, for some system about climate risk, but also, for example, for invasive species, we have set up several early warning systems projects that were co-created with citizens. So it's based on citizen science and citizens and local communities. For example, we are working very closely with Costa Rican communities on monitoring, for example, marine protected areas or invasive species that are coming and destroying ecosystems, but also on flooding and so on. So that the important thing there is that we have to include from the beginning the communities to see how we can adapt the protocols, the indicators to be able to create these early warning systems that will be valuable, but also that will be accessible for everybody. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you. We've got a few minutes left. So any final questions?
Thank you very much. I will do a comment and ask a question. It's the first time for me to participate to a COP. And what I hear in this session convinces me that universities have their place at the COPs. And I want to know what are the challenges you face to create platforms of collaboration between academics, public sector, and private. Because in my country, this kind of collaboration is not safe. And for public or private, when you go to negotiate a collaboration with them, they want data immediately. But in academic level, we must have 1, 2, 3 years to generate data, discuss them, compare with another research, and how you face this kind of challenge to create this platform of collaboration. Thank you.
So I will say, first of all, it takes time. It takes time to create a sort of relationship. I'm going to give you an example of Nairobi and how we work there. We were lucky enough, again, to have working with like another organization there that opened a lot of doors to us, and working directly actually with university. And, we love doing this, and we are collaborating with many universities around the world, and especially in Africa as well. And I will say that working with local universities, such as an example, the University of Nairobi, who has the connection already also with the local communities and so on. So I think, us coming from Yale University, trying to create this relationship is difficult. But if we are working with a local university or local government, local organization, then this is how it's happening, or this is how it has happened in my experience on the ground.
Yeah, so same for us. It takes a lot of time, and then we have to collaborate with local universities. And I should add that it's a matter of trust also. So we have to work together. I mean, there is no other ways to do it. So we have to collaborate with local stakeholders and decision makers and local scientists, local universities, but also with communities. And this is the only way that we can move forward. And to do that, we also need some money, and we also had to be able to attract a private or philanthropic organization to be able to fund this kind of project.
Yeah, I think that's a really great question, and I want to reiterate the time and the trust that was previously stated. I also think it's important to make clear and transparent the intentions of the researchers and the university community from the outset, and make sure that those are in alignment with the community. And you mentioned how the community often doesn't understand how the university scientific process works, the time that it takes. And I think making that clear to them at the beginning and saying, this is the process that we go through, this is what we're going to go through, and here's what we can give you and when, and give them a very specific idea of what they can expect, what the community can expect from the researcher, from the university position at the outset is very helpful. And giving them as much information and as much data as you can as early as you can is really important for building that trust. I think we often don't want to send out something that's unpolished or not perfect in our eyes, but I think just sharing with them the information shows that you trust them and you view them as an equal collaborator as well.
I just got two examples that might be copyable. I teach a course called Sustainable Business Capstone Consulting Clinic. It's a bit of a mouthful, but basically the clients are real and outside. They're either anything from student startups through to some of the biggest companies in America. And then they have a real sustainability brief, and then our students form consulting teams to answer that. So it's free. It's like, it's not with something we charge for, but it is, what do you say is like, when it's free, you sometimes overpay, that it's expensive for the client in time. They have to pay attention to the students. It may not be the best idea, but then they're not paying a consultant, they're spending time with our students. So that's a good one, because I think you can do that quite locally as well. And then there's a colleague of mine that does the equivalent for government and either local government levels, and then his students form projects to help either local government, state government, etc.
All right, amazing. Thank you so much. I think that brings us to time. Thank you all so much for taking the time to be with us today. I know I personally learned a lot and I'm leaving with a lot of ideas about this intersection, and I hope all of you are too. So thank you once again, and have a great rest of your COP. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you for I did not know so many initiatives. Oh, that's so cool. We should be part of it. Together.